You've got it. You better stop it. Ooh. You've got it. You've got it.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Cock Punch Coffee. Tim Ferriss created Cock Punch Coffee based on a fictional world he created as a creative outlet. It started with fictional writings, NFT art, podcasts, and now the release of our favorite new coffee, which is Cock Punch Coffee.
Look, there's a couple things about this that are notable. One, it's delicious.
It's so delicious.
Everyone knows bad coffee deserves to be vacuumed out of your espresso machine.
Which you've done on many occasions.
And I tip over the huge espresso machine.
It's a real pain when you
rid
get
of
the
these
wrong
beans.
beans
Yeah.
into the espresso
Cock
machine.
Punch is great.
So tasty.
Low carbon footprint, which I think matters, but also all the profits go to research. And I just cannot stress this enough. This is 100% guaranteed that all the profits are going to great causes, specifically diseases that have been sort of deemed incurable.
Yeah, and that's to Tim's foundation called Say. And we love to call this coffee with a cause. So not only does it taste amazing, but we know that the proceeds are going to support some research we really are into.
Dude, get a bag, get out, put down the Senka, put down your crap coffee. You can do better. You deserve better. To learn more, go to cockpunchedcoffee.com/TRS and use the code TRS for 20% off your first purchase.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Giboard.
Look, we are obsessed with slack lines. Gibbon slack lines. We've had one in our backyard for 10 years.
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah, since the dawn of time.
Literally, I'm into it. They created something called the Gibbon slack board,
Giboard.
And it is like, it looks like a skateboard deck with a slack line across. And it is so rad.
It's so rad. We actually have one sitting right in the middle of our like kitchen/living room. And basically
you do, because it's so good looking, it doesn't offend you.
Yeah. And you come right in the door and everybody who stops in, from teenagers to
even your mom,
even my mom, everybody wants to try it out and, practice their balance a little bit in the living room. And it's just been such a fun, cool way to add some balance practice. And most importantly, play into our everyday lives.
Yeah. I think we can't stress that enough, is that we want to create opportunities for movement enrichment, balance work. We think balance is so important. We put it as a vital sign.
Yeah, and we always say it's like the unsung hero of longevity. Like, it's so
if
critical.
you want to feel less stiff, jump on around. You want to see how trashed you are from your workout, jump on the Giboard. I cannot recommend this enough. Lisa has one for Fox. We've got one at the gym. We've got one at the house. It is so stinking fun.
It's so stinking fun. And you get some secret balance practice, and it's like test your mobility, and there's all these cool features too.
I brought it to the university, and immediately the kids were just like elbowing each other to mess around. I'm like, that's it. So if you can see that it inspires you to play and use it, you've got to do it.
Yeah, and this thing only weighs 9 pounds, so it's super lighthtweight and portable.
I'm a big kid too. I'm 109 kilos.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah, it supports your weight.
No problem.
No problem.
Yeah, it's super cool. I think one of these in every home decreases injuries, fall risk.
Right. It's
better
the
feet.
most fun way to practice balance.
100%. So check this out. Go get your own Giboard. You have to do it giboardus.com. That's GIBOARDUS.com/TRS and use code TRS for $10 off any Giboard.
On this episode of the Ready State Podcast, we are delighted to welcome Mike Brown. Mike is an entrepreneur, investor, and wealth coach. Prior to founding and exiting an 8-figure oil and gas investment firm, Mike flew F-18 Super Hornets for the Navy and combined the tactical precision honed in the cockpit with real-world experience in navigating the complex world of finance. His coaching programs focus on helping entrepreneurs bridge the gap between wealth and freedom. He lives with his wife Claire and 2 children in the foothills of Morrison, Colorado. This episode may seem a little out of the ordinary for our podcast.
It is right
so
in the middle
not.
of health.
Yeah, and I think what is so cool about this is no one in our space is talking about the role of money and our relationship with money as it relates to health. And it's a really big deal. It really has a big impact on our physical and psychological well-being.
I could not agree more. And what I'll say is, of all the people we've interviewed, I probably could have gotten the most out of this. I was like, where was this call 10 years ago? Where's this call 20 years ago as a kid? Mike is great in his perspective and thinking about it and just getting us to think about that as a stressor. Like when we were like the pillars of human performance, like sleep, nutrition, and you're like, where's how you discuss money with your partner?
Yeah, and how we all have these deep-seated like giant
Not me.
deep-seated sort of childhood experiences with money, many of which are very dysfunctional.
Let's call it trauma.
That we bring into adulthood and into our relationships that really
man.
can, change our well-being. And so I think it is so cool to actually talk to someone who's trying to untangle that a little bit and give people tools and strategies to reframe and rethink their relationship with money, because it's so connected to their overall well-being.
I, as you know, have performed a few weddings, and as a person who sits down with a couple and talks about things, I literally am, one of the questions I ask is, how do you talk about money? So this is such a great podcast. I can't wait for everyone to listen to what he has to say. You're going to have your mind blown, and hopefully initiate some great conversations with your own family that are going to be super comfortable.
Enjoy this awesome conversation with Mike Brown. Mike Brown, welcome to the Ready State podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Oh man, we have so much to talk about. I feel like we've just discovered a new continent on America. Or on the earth in terms
You're
of
just saying that because all we do is read history books.
It's
now.
true. You
we're
read
100 years old.
You read books about like submarines and the world fair. I'm like, you've become a middle-aged dude. It's so great. But this topic today for everyone is the hidden stressor, hidden killer. I think I have not heard anyone talk about this in a meaningful way as it relates to health and performance. So I can't wait to get into it. And that's all I'm going to tee it up for.
Yeah. And then I just want to say, we know each other well through this business group, Baby Bathwater, we're in. And so I think people probably see me wearing a bunch of Baby Bathwater apparel all the time, but that's, I think, how we originally met. Although I feel like, there's so many places that we have crossed paths that, I don't know. Did we ever meet before Baby Bathwater?
I'm not sure, though. I was way into the CrossFit world back in the day, and then kind of drifted out of it. So I'm sure that early in those days we may have crossed paths at some point.
Yeah, we were like doing pull-ups together or something. So anyway, all right. Before we get into this, the nitty-gritty of money and health and all things money, I'd love just to hear a little bit about your background, where you grew up,
and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, and where you are in the world.
Cool. So we'll start at the beginning. I was born a long time ago. I'm just kidding. I grew up in Midland, Texas, which is flat, hot, and windy. Nowhere you want to grow up except for it's a great place to be from. And I knew two things early on in my life. I wanted to be in the military, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I joined the Navy.
Those things, wait, stop. Those things do not normally go together. I know a lot of smart kids after the military become entrepreneurs, but that's a long way around the bar.
It's never usually part of the pre-plan. It's not part of the pre-plan.
So when I was young, I loved to read, and I read Patriot Games when I was in the third grade, and I decided I was going to be Jack Ryan, and I was going to go to the Naval Academy. And then I read Atlas Shrugged when I was 16, and I decided I was going to be an entrepreneur. So there was no more choice after that. That was just what I was going to do. So I did go to the Naval Academy. I ended up flying jets, F-18s in the Navy for just about a decade. And then I got out in 2011 and moved back to my hometown and worked for a mentor of mine, a family friend in the oil and gas industry, which is all you do in Midland, Texas. And when I joined, he told me it was the best time in the history of oil and gas to be in oil and gas. And he was right. So I founded my company in 2013 with my business partner from the Navy. And we had a wild run, eventually built and exited that company for 8 figures. And, I was building massive portfolios for private equity companies. So I really consider myself more of an investor than an entrepreneur. And the difference is an entrepreneur has this like burn the boats mentality, full speed ahead, like I'm going to overcome any obstacle. An investor is someone that just has to be right more often than they're wrong. And so that's really the lens through which I view entrepreneurship is like, I just need to win 6 out of 10 times. I don't need to always swing for the fences. But my story really, I feel like starts when I sold my company. And I often say like the day I sold my company, I thought I'd never be unhappy again. Like I had done all the things that I was supposed to do, right? I did.
Bless your little heart.
Yeah. I mean, but I did it, right? I did the thing that society tells us we're going to do. I went and tested myself in combat. I founded and exited a company. I had the house. I had the cars. Like I was doing all the things that are supposed to fill us up. And I was the same person.
Yeah.
And now what? Like, oh no, it didn't work. I still have this giant hole inside of me. And now what am I going to do? And somewhere along the way, I ended up buying a distressed e-commerce company, and Julia had a front row seat to that. And I was losing a ton of money. I was building this amazing house. There was cost overruns, and 2 years after what should have been a life-changing exit, where I never have to work again, I am more stressed out, full of anxiety. There are days I don't even want to get out of bed in the morning to face the day because I'm so ashamed that I had tasted this freedom and I blew it. And so I realized at that point that my relationship with money was completely broken. And so fast forward to today, like that is the thing that I care about helping people with. It's really born of my own journey of like, why, how did I get here? Why did I have this massive amount of wealth and then all of a sudden get in this crisis? And so that's what I help on entrepreneurs wind and other people as well, any high performer.
So I'd love to just dig deep on that transitional period and go a little deeper on the exit thing. And, as you're telling that story, what I think about is, in our space, we've had so many athletes, professional athletes.
Say, this is the Olympic dream, right?
Yeah. And it reminds me so much of that transitional phase because ultimately that is what it was, right? Was this transition. It's just that it's not from athletics to regular life for you. It was from, investor entrepreneurship to having exited a company, but
even
still
F-18's the company, you had a thing to do. You had a place to go.
Yeah,
totally.
Right. Like you had a plan. And so, I'd just love to hear more, your thoughts about, would you approach it differently? Do you think you needed to go the path to learn that? How can people manage those big life transitions? In, separate and apart from the money piece, like how do people manage those transitions better? And how could you have been better set up to manage those transitions? Because I think that's where most people's life stress
even
comes.
more is that, was that really on you to have figured that out? Or was that a failure of leadership and preparation? Because we are seeing now that there is some consciousness around, and again, a lot of the athletics is through our lens. We just talked to 2 Olympians who are working on this problem this last weekend at the national championships, who are just saying, man, after each Olympics, I'm augured in. I don't know what to do. I just go back to the Olympics because it's easier than facing another life without meaning.
Yeah. So one of the things I do now is I help fellow entrepreneurs with that post-exit transition because, look, it's certainly a first world problem. Probably people feel the same about Olympians. Like, what do you have to be sad about? You just went to the Olympics, right? But it's actually a real problem because when you have these peak experiences, and you've been working so hard, so solely focused on something for so long, and then all of a sudden it's over, it leaves this massive vacuum in your life, and you've got to figure out what to fill it up with. And the fact is that a lot of us start the journey, whether it's athletics or entrepreneurship, whatever that pursuit is of high performance, a lot of us start that pursuit trying to fill up a hole, right? There is something that we are trying to feel or achieve. Right? Like we want to feel the way that we imagine we might feel when we get that gold medal. And then that happens. And it's like, okay, what next? And this could be true of any kind of transition from jobs, from like a divorce,
for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I've actually built a playbook for what I had wished that I had done. And what I think is the important part of this. So the first part of that playbook is actually just sitting in stillness and getting really uncomfortable. You're going, look, we are told our whole lives to be busy, right? If I wake up in the morning and I just start grinding, what that allows me to do is not feel any of those things that maybe are driving me. And so we cover up the things we don't want to feel with busyness or achievement or external validation. And then all of a sudden that goes away and you go, oh man, I'm still left with myself. So the first recommendation is sitting in stillness.
We call that plausible deniability in sports. Is if I just stay really busy, do a lot of busy work, and outwork the competition, any failure can't be my fault because look at all the things
Yeah,
that I
look
was
how
doing.
hard I've
Look at
worked.
how I was busy.
Yeah.
Like, meanwhile, I've destroyed all my relationships. I'm totally broke. I have no plan. I have terrible,
Yeah.
understanding of who I am in the world. But look at all this work I've done.
Yeah, and one other thing that is so interesting you're saying that is we just had the adventurer Colin O'Brady on our podcast, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he has broken like 10 world records, and I think he's learned that in his own work and attempts at self-discovery that this quiet alone time is critical, and he's actually started this thing called the 12-hour walk that we're going to do in the fall, and it's real simple. You just leave your house and walk around for 12 hours without a podcast or a
Cell phone,
or, you just literally sit with your own thoughts for 12 hours and just like walk around. And if that means you walk around your block 150 times, that's fine. Or you walk around an art museum. I mean, it's real flexible, but the goal is this sitting in silence piece. So it's really interesting to hear that that's such a part of your secret sauce.
Yeah, well, because what happens if we don't do that? Right. And we see this oftentimes with post-exit founders, and I imagine athletes as well, is they finish the achievement and then they just fill that energy right back up, right, with new busyness, whether that's a new career, whether that's a new company. And what happens to founders is they sell their company, and then all of a sudden, 18 months later, they've raised money again. They're back working 100-hour weeks, ignoring their family. And even though they set out to achieve this freedom, they give it all away immediately because they don't know what to do with themselves when they're sitting in that stillness, right?
They weren't dirtbag river guides trying to
Yeah.
become a dirtbag river guide again. Like, I want to become anonymous, live with my dog and my kayak again in my truck.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, babe. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, you're like, bye. Before you move on in the playbook, I do have one burning question for you. And what I wonder is your view that having a successful, like how much of a successful exit like you had or others had is luck and timing versus talent? Because sometimes I feel like there is this curse of entrepreneurs that have an exit where they're like, I am the man. Or I am the woman, like I am a genius because I exited my company. Like there's this sort of hubris that comes with an exit. You get to say
Hubris
it.
is the right word.
It sounds cool. You're awesome. I think
Gold medal.
Yeah, you just won a gold medal. And so I think oftentimes that gives people this sense that they're like entrepreneur of the year and that they can then do anything. And I think maybe you learned pretty quickly, through the e-commerce company. But I don't know. I just love your thoughts on that. Just sort of what's the luck, talent, what does that mean?
Yeah, Juliet, I feel really seen right now. I definitely did go through this Midas touch period, but in reality, it started a long time before I sold my company. Right, I started angel investing in 2013. I was deploying capital into every kind of investment you could think of: hotels, tech startups, automotive startup, medical supply company, crypto, stock options. Like I was shotgunning my capital all over the place because I could not lose. I was the most brilliant entrepreneur that has ever walked the face of the earth. I was God's gift to investing. And the fact is I was just addicted to risk at the end of the day. And what happens is every time that, you make a bet and that bet pays off, you get, the endorphins, dopamine, serotonin that flood your brain. The problem is the next time you have to bet bigger and win bigger in order to achieve that same feeling. So I was writing massively outsized checks relative to my net worth in order to just get that desired effect and hit that dopamine button over and over again. That's called hedonic adaptation. And that's exactly where I was living. And at some point, I wrote such a big check that my butt couldn't cash when I acquired this company. It all came crashing down. And before that, I carried a certain arrogance that only someone who has never failed at anything could possibly carry. And to have that all stripped away in a single kind of cataclysmic event, I believe was one of the greatest gifts of my entire life, because it gave me two things. Number one, it gave me the permission to fail. And actually, I was keeping myself small because I was so afraid of failure. I would only do things that I knew I could actually achieve before I even started. And the other thing is it gave me an empathy and a humility that allows me to connect with people on a whole different level.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you can be great Look, I am the son of an F4 pilot, right? My dad was the great Santini. If everyone, there's a reference for you. Like, he would put his face in the bowl of guacamole. He was, happy with his hair on fire. Starjet. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Um, the things that make people great, that serving, that focus, that ability to put off pleasure, to delay gratification, is that a requisite feature? And the only way you can be successful is to be just tyrannical in your own life. And then do you always have to have this crash? I'm thinking of Michael Phelps, for example, who, afterwards really had to confront when swimming went. And I have to tell you, I was never a Michael Phelps fan. I was like, that guy is not interesting to me. Now I think Michael Phelps is one of the most interesting, cool human beings ever. I'm like, you need to look at Michael Phelps and look at his journey and take away what you can. Because afterwards, he had to do all this deep processing and, and work through. I mean, I think we see the same thing with Tiger Woods. We see so many people who are really great, and then afterwards explain exactly what you're seeing. We saw it in the Patriots documentary with Tom Brady that we got to win again.
Lance Armstrong.
It's no longer fun.
Yeah,
We're not even fun, right? So the question I think for you here in this piece, because it is so echoed across so many disciplines, can you simultaneously have that drive, have that vision, and not have to pay a blood price for that?
Yeah, there's only one way, and that is if you are fortunate enough at some point to discover how to do deep interpersonal work along the way, right? So that is the only way to divert that train, because it's a matter of power versus force, and force means I am driving from a place of lack. So there is a part of me that feels not whole. If I just achieve this thing, then I'm going to be whole and happy, right? And we see that at the most extremes with the people you just listed, right? What it takes to be world class at something like Tiger Woods or Lance Armstrong or Tom Brady is such an extreme dedication. That means necessarily you are deficient in other areas of your life, right? Like
you don't get something for nothing.
100%. So if we are lucky enough at some point to discover how to do interpersonal work and go, wait a minute, before I get to this pinnacle and then realize that it didn't work and it all comes crashing down, maybe there's a way that I can fill up this hole inside of myself, and it's not through external validation and achievement. But that's the only possible way, is how can I actually shift from creating from a place of lack to what we call power, which is, okay, I know that I am whole and complete and I am good just the way I am, and I can hold a bigger vision, and I want to become the best version of myself along that path. And that's actually where true greatness is achieved, right? Is standing in that power of, I am good just the way I am, but I hold this big vision.
And we are seeing that, everyone. Those people are existing now.
Yeah.
Because I think we are getting a little bit more savvy.
So before I go back to the other parts of the playbook, when you were at that lowest low, and what drove you to realize you needed to do this work, and what was the role of your awesome partner in that? And what were like your first steps to get out of that hole? Like, did you just, hire a run-of-the-mill therapist, or like, what were your steps at that moment when you were at your low and realized that you had to actually do the interpersonal work to get out of that place?
Yeah, so I was very lucky to have discovered coaching and personal work a few years before that low. So I have a mentor named Philip McKernan that has been my coach for many years, and I've been fortunate to study under him for quite some time. So I already knew that there was a place to start turning. But I hired coaches, I hired therapists, I started reading every book I could get my hands on about the psychology of money. And then I started studying family offices and like, what do actual rich people do? Because what I was doing was what I thought rich people do. And it turns out the way they think about money is completely different than most of us think, right? Most of us take on a lot more risk than actual rich people do, right? The number one rule of the wealthy is to never lose money. And what I was doing was going out and spraying and praying and shotgunning my capital everywhere and hoping that I was going to strike it big and invest in the next Uber, when all I should have really been doing was transitioning to be a defender of wealth and protecting what I had already built, because I'd already done the thing.
Right.
Let me ask you this. I can relate to this conversation in a lot of ways, because of the stress I had as a kid. My father was absent, right? About 12 years ago, Juliet's like, I think you should probably talk to someone about your crazy family and all the anger you're holding. Thank you, J-Star. And I can really relate because I was just like freaked out, burning it in. We just published New York Times bestseller. We like achieved. And do you remember laying in bed and I'm like, what if this is the only thing I ever do? And you're like,
he actually said that. Like the book makes the New York Times bestseller list. Like we launched this app. Like we're doing great. And he's like, maybe this is my swan song. Like that's literally how he felt. Like he couldn't even enjoy the experience.
I think you're insane. And I was like, maybe I'm a little insane. Thanks. Can you talk about, because my mom, single working mother, there was stress in the family. Like you've heard the story.
Tell
everyone.
him the Christmas story.
Christmas. Like there was one Christmas where like we had $5 for a Christmas tree. That was the Christmas tree. And then we made our own ornaments. We just didn't have what we need to have.
Yeah.
When I travel now, I get a pocket burrito. You've heard about the emotional support burrito. Shout out Gabby. Where I'm traveling and I'm like, you know what? I'm just not sure, so I'll just get an extra.
What are you talking
burrito.
about? Mike's going to write a book called The Emotional Support
That's right.
Burrito.
That's right.
Like,
Everyone.
he already TM'd. I told him that he could TM it.
And my point is that I learned a lot about money watching my parents navigate money. And watching and for me, just I feel like I just want to make all the money and put it in like a mattress. And I'm like, here, Jay, I'll just go out and and I probably have some dysfunctional relationships with money we can talk about.
Yeah.
But what was your parents' relationship with money? That because it really is. You grew up in Midlands, Texas. It's not easy to fly Hornets. It's not easy to there are only a few fighter positions when you come through the Navy. Like
Totally.
You just achieve. What was it about and have you connected that and talked about your anger with your mother about money?
Man, there's a lot in that question. I can't wait to dive into all of it. So first of all, what you are referring to is what I call our cognitive financial programming, or for short, money stories. So all of us have some sort of money story, which is how we grew up with money, how we watch our parents relate to money. And that imprints upon our subconscious. And then we grow up believing that money story. And so as we come into more success or more wealth or whatever it may be, we will actually not be able to keep that wealth or success unless we reprogram those money stories. We have to uncover and figure out what those are, and then how to rewire our brain to hold the capacity for that success. Right? So we will only allow ourselves as much success as we believe we deserve, or that we can hold the vision for, right? So if I become a millionaire, but I actually still feel like I was poor growing up and that's who I am as a human, I will find a way to self-sabotage. That's what happens to lottery winners, right? Their studies show lottery winners almost always end up back where they started because they haven't created the capacity to hold that success. So that's our cognitive financial programming. So let me tell you about how I grew up. In Midland, which is the second wealthiest town in America after Greenwich, Connecticut, because of all the oil money there. My dad was an engineer at a large firm, and in the 90s, oil and gas was not a sexy place to be. Oil was like $8 a barrel, and we were middle class, but I would consider us lower middle class. There was 5 kids in the family. And when I was in junior high, my dad drove this 1985 Pontiac Bonneville. It was brown with some rust coloration, and we had thumbtacks in the roof to keep the headliner up. And I was so embarrassed by this car, right? I could not understand why my dad would drive such a shitty, embarrassing car, at 13 years old. Like now I look back and I understand, like my dad was making sacrifice. Like my dad cares about driving a cool car, right? He's making massive sacrifices on behalf of the family. But I view that and I say, well, when I grow up, I'm going to make so much money, I can drive whatever car I want. And even deeper than that, I used to watch my parents fight. I watched my parents fight every night, and they only fought about one thing. It was money, right? So I made a vow to myself, I will make so much money that I never have to worry about money. And it worked. Like that was the thing. That was my core driver for all of that success. So when you ask, how did I go to the Naval Academy and found this company? Like my sole focus was, I want to make so much money that I never have to worry about it. The problem comes in that my child brain conflated worrying about money with being responsible with money. right? So now I was just freewheeling, easy come, easy go. My attitude was, if I lose all of this, I'll just make more. Like, I had this very broken relationship with money because I never wanted to worry about money. And if I was responsible, that means I was worrying. So that was my cognitive financial programming. That was the story that I had to unwind in order to rebalance and heal, and all of a sudden step into that place of power instead of place of lack, and rebuild to financial freedom.
And I'm assuming this is part of the playbook. Did we skip ahead? Is this the next part of the playbook? Yeah. So I'm assuming sort of deprogramming our, childhood experiences with money, or at least facing that and addressing that, is a big part of the playbook. But tell us more. Am I right there?
Nailed it. So as we sit in stillness, which was step one, what happens for most of us is discomfort starts to come to the surface. And it's that discomfort. Now we get to start pulling on that thread and get really curious and go, why is this so uncomfortable? Why is it uncomfortable for me to do nothing or be nothing? And Kelly, I actually asked the same question, like, what if selling my company was the biggest thing I ever do? And at first that was terrifying. But as I started to pull back this thread, I almost started to kind of find this peace and go, wow, what if that's the biggest thing I ever do? Like, what if I never have to achieve anything again? Like, what would it look like if I could just be without actually going out and having to achieve? And the craziest thing happens when you sell a company. Everybody comes up to you the day afterward and they go, oh my God, I can't wait to see what you do next. I was like, next? Like, shit, that was hard. And I got to do something bigger and better and make more money now? Like, that's terrifying.
Well, and we learned this lesson when we closed the gym in the pandemic, that, we're like, you think starting a company is hard? Try exiting a company. Try ending a company. That is, I would say, 10x harder and gnarlier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For all these existential reasons and mechanical reasons.
Totally. So now we're in this place, in this transitionary phase of, let me get really curious with this discomfort. Let me figure out what some of these stories are. Why do I believe the things about the world that I believe, and where did that come from? And did I choose these beliefs, or did I just inherit them from watching my parents? Right? Like, maybe my dad was a freewheeling spender, so I just watched my dad do that, and that's how that's how I grew up, and subconsciously, in turn, that's what I do with money. But I never actually chose that for myself, right? And so, how do we start to go, what are my values? How do I want to live? Did I choose these for myself? And now, once we have a really solid value set, now we can start working backwards and create our life in the image of the thing and the life that we actually want to live, that we've chosen for ourselves. And that's where creating from power starts. So once I get really clear on what lights me up, what I value, and what I want my life to look like, now I can work backwards and reprogram into wealth and do the things that use my money to create that life that I want to create, right? Or use my success to find what's the next version of me. Who do I need to become in order to, create a life that I never have to retire from?
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Element. And I would say that we are still extremely excited about Element Sparkling.
I just got back from a training camp in Milan.
Yes.
Two things there. One, crushed Element. It makes such a difference when I'm teaching. I don't eat a lot, and I don't eat a lot of carbohydrate because I don't want to fall on my face. So
and you don't want to get tired during the day.
Makes such a
bunch of
difference.
Food.
But sometimes when I've gone low carb during the day, towards the end of the day, I'm like, ooh, my back feels achy because I haven't had any carbohydrate.
Yeah, and you're starting to
kicked
get
out
stiff.
On my glycogen.
Yeah.
So all the water comes out. So the Element, when I travel, such a game changer. I feel like I drink more water. You would have been so proud of me. I actually drank water.
And then, you got home from this trip last night and you basically forgot to say hello to your kids and your dog, and you went directly to the fridge and got an Element Sparkling. Am I right?
Not only did I get the Element Sparkling, I got the last Element Sparkling. And I was literally like, look, my family loves me.
We saved one for you.
I know. It really was amazing. And then even Caroline took a sip. She's like, oh, I like this flavor. And I was like, put that down.
Yeah.
It's not for children.
Yeah. I mean, Element Sparkling is the tops. It's so good.
Combination,
it's a party in your mouth. It's great.
It is. Adding the salt is such a game changer. It's such a game changer.
Yeah, and salt plus sparkling is just the perfect mix.
We literally drink it every day. Right now, if you want to order drink mix through our link, you get a free sample pack with Elements flavors. And if you want a party in your mouth, try the sparkling. Go to drinkelement.com/TRS.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Momentus. And today we want to talk to you about a product that Kelly in particular has been using and loving, and that's Elite Sleep.
So Elite Sleep was invented by some really incredible people working with the military, in conjunction with the military, who have to deploy and be in these radically different time zones very quickly and sort of hit the ground running. So Momentus has an incredible sleep product, right? We love the Elite Sleep. The
sleep pack.
The sleep pack,
Yeah.
excuse me. But when I travel, I take the Elite Sleep. And the reason is it has melatonin, it has a couple like tart cherry and a couple other things. And the melatonin is the thing that helps you to reset your circadian rhythm. Light and melatonin and maybe caffeine. If you're traveling, I cannot recommend enough to dose the melatonin. And it doesn't take very much to sort of start that circadian rhythm clock. This is the first time I really paid attention to sleep, Elite Sleep, plus caffeine, plus sort of managing my
Plus
light.
your sleep timing,
Oh my God. Like I really feel like my jet lag just went down to like 0.
which is pretty amazing. And like all other Momentus products, it's NSF certified.
Yeah.
So you know you're getting
That's
exactly
right.
what
And
it
this
says is on the
actually
bottle.
Safe sport for if you're a college athlete, traveling, a pro athlete, this Elite Sleep is NSF
Right, which
safe.
is a huge deal for athletes
Yeah.
who have to travel and manage jet lag all the time.
Yeah, this is, again, wouldn't be the thing I would reach for all the time, but it's the thing I reach to when it matters. And I know I need to do a hard reset on my clock because I have to show up the next day. And if you travel, even just to the East Coast, West Coast, you got to give this a shot. I'm telling you, it's a big difference. So go to livemomentus.com/TRS and use code TRS for 20% off your first purchase of awesome sleep.
We've already touched on this a lot, but I would like to sort of begin the conversation about money and health and money and happiness. And I think probably a lot of people listening to this have heard that piece of data that shows that kind of over something like $75,000 a year, more money doesn't make people happier. So is that just an urban legend, or is there any truth to that? And, you know, tell us your thoughts about money
Adjusted
and
for
happiness.
local economies.
Yeah, I
of
mean,
course.
Yeah.
rate adjusted for where you live. But is that true? And what's underneath
Yeah.
that?
So the first thing I'll say is that on its head, that's correct, right? Like money does not buy happiness, but lack of money sure buys a lot of unhappiness.
Yeah.
Right. And I can tell
No
you
stress.
that like the night I sold my company, like that was the single greatest night of sleep in my life. To know that whatever problems come my way, like there are a few problems that money can't solve. But outside of that, like if a problem can be solved by money, it's not really a problem. Right. So more money in that context is better, but it doesn't necessarily lead to happiness. Like that is the inner work. The thing about happiness though, is I think we're actually solving for the wrong thing. What we should be solving for instead is fulfillment. And the only way to solve for fulfillment is, again, back to that playbook of what is it that I value? What impact do I want to create? What is my purpose here on this earth? Now let me align my actions to creating that impact, to my purpose. And if I live in that way, there are going to be ups and downs, right? Like you can't guarantee happiness for the rest of your life. Happiness by definition is a fleeting emotion. So there are days you're going to wake up and it's not going to feel great, no matter how, no matter what actions you're taking. But I can guarantee you, if your actions are aligned to your values and you are living a life that is intentionally designed to create the impact you want to create, you will be fulfilled. Right? And that to me is a much more tangible outcome than trying to chase happiness.
Yeah, I remember reading one time that people are equally as there's this thing I really hate, and I think you probably hate it too, is telling young people to like follow their passion, because what does that even mean? It super bugs me. And I remember reading that people who are good at their jobs, just the fact of being good at what you do for work is often more of a driver of happiness and fulfillment than whatever this weird obscure notion of being passionate about what you do. Do you agree? What are
I think it's some of the worst advice that we give young people. Like, I am in a crazy fortunate position to be in a position today where I leap out of bed, I wake up, I love what I do, I love the people that I serve, I love the impact that I get to create. But if you would have told me this would have been my career path at 25, I would have laughed you out of the room. right? Like there's no way I could have looked forward and be like, oh, that's what I'm going to be doing at 43, right? Like, so, and I always use the analogy of like a surf shop. Like if I love surfing, and you tell me to follow my passion and I go open a surf shop, chances are in 5 years, I'm going to really hate surfing, right? Like we ruin our passions by trying to make them into a business.
Whoa! I feel picked on right now. I own a gym.
Yeah. I
was
literally
like-
was like, all I'm like
hear that. We talked to so
15,000
many-
CrossFit gyms later,
We talked
Mike.
to so
and-
many young, like people were like, "Are you sure you want to own a gym?"
Yeah, we're like,
because
because
that's
I'm like,
not
do you
the same
enjoy
thing as
doing CrossFit?
Right.
Because that's not the same thing as enjoying running a CrossFit.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like it's really bad advice. So my advice is to kind of update that a little bit, is to find a skill that you can be passionate about and develop that skill. That will lead you to a place where then you can start making decisions about what you want your career to look like. So for me, that skill was investing, right? Like I'm not passionate about oil and gas. Like I don't care about buying properties and selling to private equity, but I love the deal making. I love the art of the deal and like being able to identify the right investment and make returns. Like that really drove me. So I focused on getting really good at that skill. That was a means to the end of then selling that company and giving me the space and the freedom to find this new career path. But I never could have gotten here without that first part, right? If I had just followed my passion from the get-go, I can't tell you what my path would have looked like, but it certainly wouldn't be here.
So I would really like to deep dive into your thoughts about money as it relates to our health, both our mental and physical health. I know there's starting to be a lot of research about this, but even in this conversation, we've already talked about you growing up listening to your parents fighting about money. I think everybody listening to this at some point in some way has had financial stress. I think it's a really common type of stress that every human has. And here we are deep into this health and wellness space, Kelly and I, and, we're at longevity conferences and talking about all this high-tech stuff to help you feel better in your body and live longer. And, never is anyone in those conversations talking about the role of money.
And let me set this up for everyone as an example of what we're sort of talking about here. We had a friend who got a blood panel, and your blood panel wasn't very good, and pre-diabetic, and lipids are off, and they started to kind of ask us for some questions. And the first thing we said was talk about your sleep, And they reported that they had a difficult time falling asleep because they were so anxious, and they were the primary breadwinner at work. And we said, well, how do you cope with that? Well, it takes 2 bottles of wine for me to be able to hit the brakes so that I can fall asleep. And again, you can't get to the bottom of the sleep without getting to the bottom of the 2 bottles of wine, without getting to the bottom of why are there, so much anxiety.
The underlying financial
Right.
anxiety.
So, here we go, where this
Right.
underlying financial stress is cascading into a whole set of behaviors that now we're trying to engineer out with other solutions, but we haven't ever talked about the root cause.
Yeah, I mean that's you've teed it up perfectly, because when we look at training and biohacking and all of these protocols, what are we really trying to do? Basically trying to reduce metabolic aging, right? And what is one of the primary drivers of metabolic age is cortisol. And when we think about, okay, well, what are the biggest stressors, right? Relationships, wealth, and health. Like those are the 3 things that we look at, right? When we look at what stresses people out. And I would argue that money is probably the number one thing. Like if information was all that we needed to be wealthy, there'd be a whole lot more rich people on this planet, right? If hard work was all that we needed to be wealthy, there'd be a whole lot more rich people on this planet, right?
Yeah.
We're all working hard, right? There's so much information on how we should be managing our money and set up a budget and cut out your Starbucks and all of this stuff out there. And there's a reason nobody follows that good advice, right? And that reason is this cognitive financial programming. So if we can actually peel back the onion on our money stories, now we can reset the baseline. And it doesn't mean that you don't ever worry about money again, but you can start to reduce the amount of stress that you have around money decisions. If I can create a decision-making framework for how to properly allocate my money, how to maybe reduce spending and save a little bit more and know that I'm going to be taken care of by the time that I retire. Like if I can get a decision-making framework, I can take the stress out of money because I know that the decisions and the habits that I'm building are going to get me where I want to go. right? We just want to feel safe. When it comes down to it, the ultimate human question is, am I safe? And most of us are not in a place where we are financially safe.
And how do people do that when they're in a partnership? Because I think the added layer of complexity is, we all have our own childhood financial programming, and we've all developed differing coping mechanisms. And then, in many cases, you show up in a partnership and now you have two people with two different childhood financial programming, and you're trying to navigate building wealth and financial security together. How do people manage that? How do you do that in a partnership?
Yeah. So we talk, and I really love working with couples.
Don't say talk about your feelings, please. This is the worst thing that can happen. You two ganging up on me, talking about my one feeling.
You have one. You have.
I mean,
one,
at least
you have one
maybe that's step two. But first is taking responsibility for yourself. And so, if I think about this, like if I feel like my partner is spending too much on Amazon, right? And and this is this constant fight loop that we have is like, oh my God, more Amazon boxes are showing up every day. Like, you have a spending problem. The first thing I need to do is go, where do I have a spending problem? Because chances are that if we're getting annoyed at our partner for something, it's something that we're actually doing and that we feel guilt or shame about, and we're projecting that onto our partner. Right? We love abdicating responsibility. Well, we'd be financially healthy if you just stopped spending. Right? How can we actually turn that around? We'd be financially healthy if I just stopped spending. So the first thing you got to do is take responsibility for what is my part in this. Then you get to look at your partner's money stories and go, oh, wow, I see that they are spending in order to try and feel this thing, maybe a lack of their life. Oh, wow, I actually see that that's the same way that their mom spent money. And you can kind of start connecting the dots. And so you're not saying, oh, it's not your fault. Like, hey, you still have to take responsibility for yourself, but you can kind of create some empathy there and go, oh, I see why you're doing this. Let's get to the root of the problem, right? If spending is the symptom, what's the actual root? Is there a lack of security? Like, is there a lack of self-worth? Like, what are you trying to cover up by this spending habit? And when you heal things at their roots, now you can actually create those better habits and get on the right track.
What you just described actually is something that I talk about with some of the best coaches on the planet, which is curiosity. And again, take money as an allegory for we have to win, we have to solve this problem, we as a group. And what you're really seeing is that when I become curious about process and root, we even discussed this, on this podcast. Why does the body think this is a good idea? What problem is the body trying to solve? Then suddenly you really do. It detaches a lot of emotional, cable cars just that you're dragging down the track, and you're like, oh, and you can have a dispassionate conversation or a rationale or discussion about is this the best for us? And why am I making these decisions in this moment? And that's really powerful, that curiosity. And it's hard around money. It's real hard.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And asking really curious questions to me is a superpower. Like, that's what I do as a coach. Just engage in this really Socratic process to get down to first principles and go, okay, yeah, but why? Like how do you want to feel when you hit this certain thing? Right. And I know that's making you talk about your feelings, Kelly, and I promise I won't do that too often, but ultimately,
I feel like I was teed up here on the Amazon box thing. It's totally fine.
Right? But I mean, we ultimately, like, why do we want money in the first place? Well, it's to feel a certain way, probably to feel safe in some sort of way. Right. So,
and maybe to have lots of knives.
And here's something wild about money. So Hampton, which is another entrepreneurial network, did a wealth survey of their members to get into the group. I think you've got to have a $1 million net worth, but there's people all the way up way into the 9 figures. Okay. This is wild. This is what they found. Regardless of how much money people have, they all unequivocally answered that they needed at least twice as much as they have now in order to feel safe. Right? So if that's the answer that we come up with, that must mean that the number is not the problem.
Right? You're never fit enough.
Yeah, it's never
one
enough.
of our world champion, 2-time Olympic friends, was an incredible rower. I'm just gonna throw her under the bus right now, Erin Cafaro. her last 6K split that she pulled was 144 on the erg. So she pulled 6 kilometers at 144 split. If you know anything about rowing, it's sort of disgusting. It makes me feel queasy. And she got off that, and it's like the woman's record, and she was a superstar. And she was like, man, I just am not fit right now. I'm like, when is it? When are you going to be fit enough, Aaron? When is the engine big enough? And it's never big enough, and you're never fit enough, and you're never prepared enough. You know, it's true. Like, and the money's got to be the same way.
You can just see though that if you never feel enough, either in fulfillment or from a money perspective, then you're just on this hamster wheel. And talk about stress and high cortisol, and you're just chasing all the time. And I think we've all come to realize that there's so many parts of good health that are connected to our mental health. And man, if you're just stuck on a financial stress wheel all the time, it's not good for your overall health. Like, your longevity is not going to happen.
No, and
no longevity.
To me, the only way to get out of that is to become process oriented instead of outcome oriented.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, I'm going to do the things that I know are going to keep me healthy. And I'll give you guys a great example. Like, I was a very dedicated endurance athlete. I was in Ironmans for a long time. I was racing road bikes for a long time. Then I became a mountain bike racer. During that whole 10, 15 year period, again, I was driven from this place of lack. All I cared about was results. Am I beating the guy next to me? Was all that. So I could go have a PR. I could have my best time ever. I could be the fittest I'd ever been. But if I didn't beat the guy next to me, the race was a wash. Like it might as well not even showed up. Right. And as I stand before you today, I can tell you I'm actually the healthiest that I've ever been. I'm not the fittest that I've ever been. Right. Back in the day when I was working out 25, 30 hours a week, I was really fit, but I was incredibly unhealthy. Super high, stress across the board, not just from a mental perspective, but also from a training load perspective, right? I just always in this broken down, beat up state, as most endurance athletes are, right? Very fit, unhealthy. That's why triathletes have heart attacks in their 40s, right? Massive metabolic stress on the system. As I became process oriented, what would it look like to just ride my bike for fun? What if instead of trying to be the first one to the top of the mountain, I just go out and ride, and I look around at the trees, and I try and enjoy my time here? And what if I only ride 3 days a week instead of 17 hours a week? Like, what is this?
One of our good friends, you remember you thinking that?
No.
Nicole Christensen, who's an incredible coach, CrossFit Roots, but also coaches a lot of high-level mountain bikers. She says she and her husband were like, click, we have to uncouple our competitive drive. We do not nature for time. Like, I think that was just such a big and important piece, where instead of just applying this razor edge to 100% of the things you do, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And she was like, I don't know. I think we could just go out and enjoy ourselves in as an adventure fitnessing and not worry about the FTP.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a, again, lower stress way to live. When I think about what does health actually look like I was getting nervous before I would go on a bike ride, because like, am I gonna perform today? Like, am I gonna be able to beat my personal best?
Right? Am I gonna get my Strava PR
Strava
today?
is right for you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And like,
the most broken people, I talked to Strava. I've never seen so many injured people than I did at Strava, because all they lived for was the next PR and the next break. And that was how the whole system was valued and set up. And so everyone was like, I don't understand why my knees and back hurt all the time. I'm like, well, just going, being able to only identify success as X.
Yeah, did I get a king of the mountain or not?
right. So like, am I coming out of my workout more stressed out than I went in, because all I'm doing is beating myself up and exhausting myself mentally for not being fast enough, right? Or am I actually doing the thing that we're trying to do here, right? Which is, again, if I'm optimizing for health, putting a bunch of pressure on myself to hit a PR is probably actually the wrong direction. Like, how can I feel good in my body? How can I move in a way that feels natural and fun and actually brings me joy, right? And when we look at the same thing with money, right? So the reason budgeting doesn't, everyone said, well, you got to have a budget and you got to stick to it, right? But if we create from this place of lack, we're never going to actually feel good. So what I try to do is give people permission to spend on the things that they value. So, I value cars. I love sports cars. I buy sports cars. Is it the best way for me to spend my money? Absolutely not. But I give myself permission to not optimize because that brings me an outsized amount of joy. It's my hobby. I get to connect with my dad over cars. Like, it brings me a massive amount of joy. And no, is it the best thing from my financial life? No, but overall return on happiness, like that's what I'm trying to optimize for. Like, I don't need every dollar to be put to work and be doing the best possible thing it can for my wealth. Like, my wealth is the way that I want to feel and the way that I want to live my life. And so if we can give people that blow off valve and go, hey, yes, you probably have to think about the way you're spending, right? There are places that are worth it to cut, but some places that you really care about, like, let's spend there. Let's know that we're going to not optimize our budget. You're going to spend on the things you care about, but it's going to bring you an outsized amount of joy. That allows us to create discipline in other areas because we have that relief valve.
So, one quick side question: did you buy your dad a nice car?
I did.
The ultimate flex on
Yeah,
your dad.
yeah.
Right?
I was like, did you buy your dad a nice car?
It was so. I was in an amazing position recently. My dad, I've always wanted to buy my dad a car because of the reasons that we talked about. He drove the piece of shit car and sacrificed on behalf of the kids. So when I started my company, that was a goal of mine. And this last February, I had a new car coming in, and my dad wanted to fly up and take delivery with me, and he was super excited about it. And I told him that I was trading my old car in, and we went to the dealership. I took delivery of the new car, and then I was like, "Hey, Dad, let's go say goodbye to the old car." And we walked over to it, and I handed him the keys, and I said, "It's yours." And it was really one of the top 3 feelings of my entire life to be able to give my dad a gift like that when he had sacrificed so much on our behalf.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. I just was thinking, I was like, he had to have.
I was like,
you have to have bought your
Mom,
dad a car.
Here's a burrito.
I would love to slightly shift gears and talk about how weird we are about money on a societal level, because I think it's also really hard for people to rewrite their money stories because of all of this external stuff. I feel like, we live in Marin County where there's a lot of wealth. And I think we have this weird thing as a society where we all want to make money and have money, but then we sort of hate people who have money and think of them as evil. And I think there's a perception that kids who grow up with more privilege are worse off. People who have money are assholes. I don't know. I just think we have this weird thing where
people who have more money than us are assholes.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I just think like on a bigger societal level, we have this weird, like, we're really judgmental of people with money, yet we all want to have more money. I don't know. How do people reconcile that? What's your view on that? And then how do people, again, with that sort of external load coming down about all of these, societal feelings about money, how do people navigate their relationship with money in that bigger context?
Yeah. So to understand this, I think we have to look at it from an evolutionary perspective, which is, if you think back to hunter-gatherer days, like, we could actually not store excess. We could not have more resources than we needed, right? There was no way to preserve meat or harvest until the agricultural revolution. There was actually zero chance of having more than you needed, right? So the concept of wealth on its head is actually only about 10,000 years old, right? At the dawn of the agricultural revolution, now all of a sudden we can create excess. So we have actually not, from an evolutionary perspective, there has not been enough generations for our brain to rewire to adapt to what it's like to have more than we possibly can. So when you look at money as the root of all evil, one of the oldest money stories ever told, right? Like, this is ever present in our earliest history. It's deep in our religious texts, right? That, a rich man can't enter the gates of heaven, things like that, right? So we've been told this from a very young age. And the other thing is, it's not polite to talk about money in society, right? There's only 3 things you're not supposed to discuss: politics, religion, and money. So what that allows us to do is suffer in silence, right? We all have these money struggles. We all, are buying things that we don't need with money that we don't have to impress people we don't like. And then we can't talk about how much debt we're in because it's impolite dinner conversation. All of that creates this crushing load. So it's no wonder we're super stressed out about money, because we know we're supposed to have more, but once you have more, you're not supposed to show it off because that makes you an asshole, like you said, right? You can drive a nice car, but you can't drive that nice a car because then your neighbors are going to hate you. Like, there is so much conflicting information paired to the fact that we're actually not wired to even be able to grok the concept of wealth anyway, like, wow, what a confusing place to live in. So what the hell do you do about it, right? Well, number one is back to this value and alignment proposition is, all right, why would there be a reason to have wealth? If I think about this, like, why shouldn't we just have enough to get by? And then maybe everybody could, get along better or something like that. Well, if I look at what I value, how do I want to impact the world? Like, how do I leave this place a little bit better than I found it? What is my purpose? And I know these are really, really big questions and they're not solved in a single sitting, right? But if I can start to create a framework for the impact that I want to have here, now money becomes a tool to achieve the thing that I value. And if I can tie money as a tool to make the impact that I want to have, now there is a just and good reason to tie wealth to achieving our values. And to me, that makes a really great case for creating as much wealth as I possibly can. So the more money I have, the more I can accelerate the change that I want to see in the world. And that to me is a great reason to be rich.
I love it. So I do think we need to have a part 2 of this because there is, I think, about 100 questions that we didn't get to ask. And I don't even think we got through the entire playbook.
Where do you send people to have this next conversation?
Yeah, like, I think
people are
everyone
listening to this and they're like, okay, I see myself in these conversations.
Yep.
I see my own stress in these conversations. Where do people go for the next piece?
Yeah, so you can find more about what I'm doing at unbreakablewealth.com. I've got both group and one-on-one coaching programs. I have a newsletter that I put a ton of effort into every week. It's all of my best stories, insights. That's completely free. So no matter what level of wealth you're at, there's definitely a lot of good information based on my own experience there. I put a lot of effort into Instagram and Twitter. So that's Instagram is at mbrown.co. Twitter is mbrown_co. And I'd love to connect with you guys there. I have conversations with all of my followers. And this is just something I'm really passionate about trying to shift in the world. And I'm driving as fast as I can.
Do you have any pieces of homework that people should do, like tonight or tomorrow with their families? Give us like, hey, I need to start this conversation. How do I start this conversation? What am I going to do and put on my calendar?
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to start is, what is a childhood or early adolescent money story that shaped my relationship with money, and how does that show up for me today? Like, if you can start answering that question, that'll give you that insight into, oh, wow, like that's the reason I behave this way, right? Like, that's maybe why I have a spending problem, because I watched my dad have a
We're always going to run out of gas. Are we going to run out of gas? We might run out of gas.
Yeah.
Just like years and years
maybe
of maybe we're going to run out of gas.
Our house. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think those stories are really deep, and I so value what you're doing. And I know I said it earlier in the episode, but I think this is one of those pieces of our health and well-being that literally no one is talking about, and is so critical to get to the bottom of if we really want to feel good in our bodies and live long and have healthy relationships. I mean, it touches all of the things that we talk about in the health and wellness space at a very deep and important level. And I think, we've got to get our relationship with money on track, because it really is this missing piece in terms of like feeling healthy and happy in our lives.
Mobility, VO2 max.
Money.
I
thought you were going to say mobility and money. TM.
I love it. That's our joint bestseller. That the three of us.
Mobility moves.
Mobility and money. TM. All right. Well, Mike, serious. Thank you so much for being here, and everyone listening, go check it out and do your homework tonight.
I appreciate you guys having me on and what you're putting out in the world. You guys are awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Ready State Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, check out all our episodes here or at thereadystate.com. And be sure to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes to help others find our show.
Check us out and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Ready State.
Until next time, cheers, everyone.
You've got it.